What era was Family Guy in when you first became a fan? Was it the wholesome early years of its original run? The post-revival boom that made it the show it is today? The modern years, when it already sucked, but you just couldn't escape those sexy clips channels? Yeah, it was the last one, wasn't it? For me personally, I was part of the generation that discovered the show in the early 2000s, when it was being syndicated on Adult Swim after it got canceled. Except I'm Canadian, so for us it was on Teletoon, just before undergrads in Mission Hill. Now back then, I was a huge fan of The Simpsons, and as far as I knew, there was no other show like it. So imagine my surprise when one day I'm watching TV, and I stumble upon this new cartoon about a fat, stupid, alcoholic dad with a hot, nagging wife and a blue-collar family. And it was actually good. My 11-year-old brain practically exploded with excitement. This was it. Somebody had done it. A whole new show just like The Simpsons. At the time, the similarities seemed uncanny to me. The characters that made up the family, the approach to storytelling and humor. It had that same mix of traditional sitcom vibes with goofy and surreal jokes, edgy cultural satire combined with heartwarming lessons for the characters. And of course, most importantly, it had catchy songs.
We're off on the road to Rhode Island, the home of that old campus swing.
Now obviously, I really liked Family Guy when I found it as a kid. I thought it was an impressively good show. And even though it only had 3 seasons at the time, it was uniquely quick to finding its footing. The quality was strong almost right out the gate, and that made practically every episode consistently enjoyable. So if you would have asked Kid Slush, he would have said that it was a slam dunk. But even with all that in mind, even as a kid, I still knew that it wasn't quite on the same level as The Simpsons. It just didn't have that sweet, yellowy, Simpson-y goodness. By which, of course, I mean that it didn't cripple my emotions and leave me crying like the little bitch that I am. So even though it was great and it was funny, I felt like it lacked the emotional depth that really set The Simpsons apart from all other cartoons. Well, except for maybe Futurama, I guess, which is arguably closer to The Simpsons than Family Guy was, but we're just gonna conveniently ignore that now. Anyways, for that reason, I basically always saw Family Guy as the lesser show, an inferior copy, a little brother that was stuck in the shadows of its much older, much fatter brother. And yet, I had hope. For whatever reason, I wanted to believe that eventually, Family Guy would ascend to the same level. I felt that deep down it had the potential to truly rival The Simpsons and even beat them at their own game. The ingredients were all there, and the one thing that truly cemented that belief was my all-time favorite episode, Brian Wallows, Peter Swallows.
No one who sings Carmen like you is pathetic.
What?
I heard you sing Habanera. You were sublime.
You liked my aria?
I was overwhelmed.
You're the first person who ever complimented my habanera. Thank you.
I've always thought this episode is very effective at accomplishing its goals. It's well-rounded, the characters feel grounded and likable, even when they have birds in their beard, and it hits all the emotional beats pretty hard, particularly its main plot. We get this story about a lonely Brian that's looking for love, but can't find anyone to form a deep connection with. Just attractive women who are unintelligent and have no interest in anything sophisticated. Yeah, Brian used to be a very different character. New Brian would be all over the stupid hot girl. Old Brian is more like if you think of Brian today, and then just imagine the exact opposite of that. Anyway, here he turns to alcohol out of depression and loneliness, and that causes him to get a DUI and forces him to do community service for the elderly, which turns his life into a living hell. He gets stuck with this bitchy old lady named Pearl that's always yelling at him and threatening him, dissing his tomato bisque.
What is this, spit soup?
Tomato bisque.
What is this, snot soup?
Tomato bisque.
What is this, diarrhea soup?
But then right at the end of the second act, they hit us with her backstory, that she was a famous singer who tried to venture into opera but failed miserably, causing her to become the bitter old recluse we see today. Now obviously, this reveal completely changes the dynamic between her and Brian. They fall in love, she becomes the deep connection he'd been searching for, and it's not just played off as a joke like it would be in modern Family Guy. The episode actually does a good job of selling their feelings for each other. Their connection is over something that's important to both of their lives, so I believe that it's real. But you all know how this episode goes. Pearl dies, leading to this bittersweet final moment between her and Brian that can make even the toughest of men weep. Now, with this episode living so gloriously in my memories, I was planning to make a video about how old Family Guy could stand tall next to The Simpsons, that it was just as capable of a show, and that it should have kept pushing forward in that direction. And I was gonna analyze this episode to prove my point, but when I actually sat down and rewatched it, I suddenly realized what an idiot I am for ever thinking that was correct at all. Plot twist, as nice as some of the Brian Pearl moments were, this episode did not hold up the way I thought it did. And I mean, random B-plot aside. The main story, as a whole, wasn't nearly as hard-hitting as I remembered, and honestly, I kinda thought they killed Pearl off way too quickly. I mean, I know they did that to squeeze in a song, and the song is pretty damn great. You don't with the song. Maybe less of the Peter Bird stuff, but you don't with the song. But having it happen like that just blunts the emotional impact of the ending a little bit, because we don't really get to spend any time with the two of them after they fall in love. We got like one scene, that's it. I wanted more of that sweet Brian and Pearl action. Now here's the thing, I'm not trying to say that this was a bad episode, because don't get me wrong, it's still a very good episode. One of the best in the show even. But this idea I had in my head, that it was somehow on the same level as classic Simpsons emotionally, was just incredibly wrong. Like, it's not even close, let's be real. And just so I'm being clear here, I'm not comparing this episode to the super early Simpsons stuff that's like insanely emotional. I'm comparing it to the wacky David Merkin era Simpsons. With the zany and chaotic humor that feels more similar to where Family Guy was when it started. Even when compared to those episodes, it just couldn't compete. And I'm gonna be honest, at first I didn't know how to feel about that. I'd had it built up in my mind for all these years that old Family Guy was just like classic Simpsons and that this episode was the proof. And yeah, in retrospect, I probably should have seen it as a red flag that I formed that opinion at age 12 and never actually looked back into it again. Lesson learned, I'm an idiot. But now that I've come back to this episode after all these years, what I've realized is that these shows are actually nothing alike. I mean, sure, Family Guy may have taken inspiration from The Simpsons.
We act like we didn't take a lot from The Simpsons. We took a lot from The Simpsons.
But it prioritized very different things and had completely unique intentions with what it was trying to be. Like even in those older episodes, which were heartfelt and actually had real stories, the plot was never really the star of the show. It was always the humor, the satire. That's the real priority for Family Guy, and that's why it famously feels so random. Because in their episodes, it doesn't matter what's happening in a scene as long as what's happening is funny. That's why, even if it doesn't make any sense, they'll bend a situation to fit the joke they want to make, conveniently breaking the realism of their worlds for the sake of a gag.
Hey, since I became president, profits have been higher than Alyssa Milano.
What kind of cheap shot, Joel?
I'm suing, I'm on it.
That style is very different from how classic Simpsons approached absurd humor, which focused more on building it into the narrative, the characters, and the town. Also, this obviously applies even more to the cutaway gags, but you guys are smart. You don't need me to explain that to you, you've seen the South Park episode. But yeah, with that fundamental difference in mind, I had another realization. I wasn't just wrong about old Family Guy, I was wrong about new Family Guy too. See, I always thought that from season 4 onwards, after it got uncanceled, Family Guy went in the wrong direction. It got too outrageous, too wacky, too random. I thought it was a huge mistake for the show to leave behind its heartwarming nature for this zanier approach. But after rewatching that episode, I kind of think they were right to embrace those changes. Because if you think about it, a lot of those qualities are what made Family Guy unique. They just fit better into the natural structure of the show. And so I think that by doubling down on those things, it actually helped Family Guy cast away the accusations of being a Simpsons ripoff. It gave the show its own voice. Like, it's not a coincidence that the show exploded in popularity right after it embraced those changes, or that the show's most iconic moments and episodes came after it was brought back. That new direction is what really stood the test of time, not trying to be more like The Simpsons. In fact, carving their own path is what allowed them to overtake The Simpsons and become Fox's biggest show for years. It's how they defeated The Simpsons. And it gave us Slender Man, Peter.
Kill yourselves.
Peter!
Come on, it's just a goof.
It was all worth it for Slender Man, Peter. Now, as much as I want to preach that I'm a changed man, that I've found new love for post-revival Family Guy, I gotta admit, there was something special about those older episodes that is sorely missed today. And I know I've said this before, but it always comes back to the characters. I really miss when the characters felt real and relatable, and how that naturally rounded out the stories we got, instead of just getting 22 minutes of random garbage that is somehow also boring. Like, it's no secret that the characters today have become shells of who they used to be, and that was probably driven by them becoming vessels for the wackier style of humor. It enabled them to lose touch with their personalities and just lean in on crazy. cheesy, but I think the show could have kept the integrity of its characters intact while still embracing what made it unique. Like, do the wacky jokes and the crazy plot directions, but keep the characters a little more grounded. That way, as long as the jokes are still funny, you'll end up with a solid episode, which I think describes the best of what Family Guy was doing between seasons 4 and 9. Hell, even in the newer, crappier episodes, we'll occasionally get some hidden gems that strike this same balance. And I'm totally not just saying that so I can plug my extremely underappreciated Hidden Gems video. But you know, while I was wrong to look at Brian Wallows as the standard that Family Guy should strive for, it wasn't the wrong place, because there's a different season 3 episode that perfected the formula. The all-time classic, Road to Europe.
The only reason we die is because we accept it as an inevitability.
Do you think I'll ever find the right woman?
Oh, God, yes, man. Come on, dude, you're great.
In my opinion, Road to Europe nails the balance between strong characters and goofy writing. It's got that edgy, wacky style of humor that Family Guy is known for. The story is a little on the ridiculous side, which takes it in directions that The Simpsons would never go in. Like, I can't imagine Homer Simpson feng shuiing the organs of a camel, at least not in the golden years. But despite this, it still remains anchored in a grounded character relationship between Brian and Stewie. Their friendship is what really brings the whole thing home and makes the adventure feel satisfying by the end. The caring for each other, the moments of vulnerability, the taking a dump in Mother Maggie's shoes.
You want to get some ice cream? That'd make you feel better, right? You want to get some McDonald's? You want to take a dump in Mother Maggie's shoes? Okay, let's go take a dump in Mother Maggie's shoes.
It's the glue that holds it all together. That's how they really strike a balance between wacky, raunchy humor and likable characters. Though admittedly, this applies more to the Brian and Stewie story from this episode than the Peter and Lois B-plot at Kiss Fest. But you get the idea, right? This superficial analysis is satisfying enough. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Brian and Stewie episodes are so revered by fans, because they tend to be the ones to embrace that character relationship component the most. That's why the Bank Vault episode was met with unanimous praise, while the very similar Send in Stewie was not. Because while both are deep character study episodes, one focuses on Brian and Stewie's relationship, while the other is basically just a Stewie monologue the whole time. And that just don't hit the same. Even though I actually really love Send in Stewie and I think it's a terrific episode. But that's not the discussion right now. The point is that character relationships ground this show and allow it to be crazy and wacky while still feeling well-rounded. But look, here's the thing. As much as I'd like to see the show take a step back and embrace that direction more, I don't want to make this video about why Family Guy sucks today and what it should do to get better, because I already did that last year. Nah, but seriously, for me, this was all about realizing that I was wrong to hate the direction Family Guy went after its revival. And more importantly, I was wrong to ever want the show to be more like The Simpsons. They're two completely different animals, and that's absolutely for the better. But now that I know that, I'll never look at my favorite episode of Family Guy the same way again.